even more happy today to have Michael Chiappone, say correctly, uh, exactly, from Texas to have a chat about mainly hadrosaurs, but perhaps um, we will diverge towards other studies, towards music, because we were speaking a bit about it in pre-live, and it's there are stuff to discuss because I'm Italian, I'm into music, and Michael has some connection here and there. So thank you very much, Michael, for accepting this first interview of mine. Welcome in my very small but very warm and comfy channel.
Of course. Thanks so much for having me on. Howdy, y'all.
First of all, let introduce yourself. Who are we talking with? Because I can
Yeah,
introduce you, but it's better that you do so I don't fuck this up.
sure. Yeah. Hey, y'all. My name is Michael Chiappone, or Chiappone, if I say it correctly.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm a PhD student at the University of Minnesota. I work in Peter Makovicky's lab here in the Earth and Environmental Sciences Department.
I didn't know Peter was in
And
Texas now. Huh.
yeah, well, in Minnesota where I'm at
Ah,
now,
sorry,
he
sorry,
had
sorry,
moved
sorry, sorry,
from
Minnesota. Yeah, right.
Chicago up to from Chicago up to Minnesota is where he's at now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So
your PhD is about.
I am, yes. I guess I can say PhD candidate now. I've passed my written and oral exams, which means they let me off the leash now and let me do my project.
Good, good. Oh yeah, because in America you have a
We
strange thing.
do,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. We have we have two exams that you go through at most, I feel like most universities, most programs, that you do, it's sort of basically like a literature review type thing, and then a proposal of what you're going to do. So I've done both of those now. So I'm a PhD candidate instead of just a PhD student. Functionally, it doesn't mean that much different, but new title.
Yeah, it's very different from what here in Europe we are used because I did my PhD in England and it's already very different from the PhD in Belgium where I reside right now.
Oh yeah.
And America is just a total different alien environment. So, yeah. So,
Yeah.
today we will speak about your most recent psychoming outreach project. But before going there, because I think it will cover most of our discussion, um, what have you studied so far, and what is your main academic interest leaning to what is your PhD project?
Yeah, yeah. So as of what I'm working on right now for my PhD is I feel like over anything else, I consider myself a taphonomist. So I study taphonomy, which is, for anyone who doesn't know, the study of how fossils actually form. Where does the fossil record come from? And that spans all the way from the time that an organism dies, all the way to the point that we actually recover it. And in some cases, people even argue that spans actually taking care of fossils and things like that is technically taphonomy. I focus on the very front end. I work on fluvial taphonomy, so looking at how bones that end up in river environments actually, move and sort and bury in order to end up in a position to become a fossil in the first place.
Uh, I like to think that taphonomy is one of those things that paleontologists tend to sometimes not have a look at to understand. For example, death assemblage, behavior, and stuff. For example, in paleopathology, the thing that I'm specialized in, taphonomy has a huge impact because sometimes taphonomy resemble pathology, as we say, and also when I was in Chicago in Niger with Paul Serino from Chicago, me and my Spanish friends we had a thing taphonomy happens, uh, because many of the things we were seeing in Niger were strongly modified from taphonomy, and we wanted to tattoo taphonomy to make like the like the gangster, like taphonomy gangster. Stupid thing that you do in the field. Um, so your research right now is about taphonomy. Are you working with specifically dinosaur bones, or are you focusing on fresh material and then moving on to paleontology?
Yeah, so it's a funny story. Originally, it was basically just going to be dinosaurs, originally. What I do, or I came in here as a master's student, I should start out saying. Originally, I was going to just do a master's on this. And here in Minneapolis, where the University of Minnesota is, we have a lab that's really cool on St. Anthony Falls, which is this big natural waterfall in the city, called St. Anthony Falls Lab. And St. Anthony Falls Lab is basically a lab that is built to study fluid dynamics,
Hmm.
looking at how water and air move and affect a bunch of different things: engineering, geology, environmental stuff, all sorts of different things. And as part of this, they specialize in these things called flumes that are these big artificial rivers, or, well, various different sizes. You can scale them up and down. The one that I have worked in so far has been a large one, like 3 meter wide, kind of a flume, one that's 80-meter long, a huge flume. And what we do is that we take, in my case, 3D printed, weighted dinosaur bones, or what we started out doing anyway, hadrosauroids, actually, funnily enough, Eolambia, um,
Mm-hmm.
and running them in this flume to see how they move in fluid flow. Now, in addition to that, we also had sheep bones that we would run alongside them to compare. And as we go, basically, we presented this at some meetings and stuff like that. It went really well. And so my advisor ended up asking me to stay on for a PhD. And so going forward, we're going to be ending up expanding into a bunch of different critters, not just dinos.
That
Um,
that's interesting.
yeah,
Yeah, because
yes.
if you think, for example, as we were saying before the live, in areas like Dinosaur Park Formation, where you have these giant floods and bombs of hundreds and thousands of specimens all transported, it's one of the major things that you need to study to understand the ecology and also the death events that hit these animals, to also reconstruct the lifestyle, because you say, okay, hadrosaurs and ceratopsians were herding animals because we see package of animals all that together, sure, but also we need to hear what taphonomists say. Maybe this assembly is just artificial, so it's not a group of animals, it's just maybe different isolated animals that have been packed together when they died, or maybe they just find themselves together in a single moment, maybe to trespass a river or something, but not living as herd animals.
Definitely, yeah. And you want to know if the places that you're finding your animals are actually the places that they were living,
Yeah.
or were those bones transported some significant distance from where they were living, or were they just moved, right down the road and not very far at all? So
Okay.
there's a lot of taphonomy kind of underlies all of our data in the fossil record.
Absolutely.
You want to
Taphonomy.
do anything with fossils, you need to understand the taphonomy of them.
Yeah, so sorry for all the biologists in chat, but to understand paleontology, you need to have a bit of geology preparation and background. And this is why doing paleontology in Italy is very nice, because we have a specific course, a specific program called Natural Science that combines both geology and biology. So at the end, this is what I did. At the end, you won't have the specific knowledge of a geologist or a specific knowledge of a biology, but you will know the base of both of them to intercross them, and that for me is the best thing in paleontology. So you can jump from bio to geo uh, relentlessly. But this evening, we are not here to discuss about taphonomy, even though it's a very interesting topic. We are here to discuss about you and what you're doing to bring dinosaur back to life to the people. So, who is Michael Chiappone outside the PhD?
That's a great question. Yeah, so um, well, I guess if we want to move it towards the direction of hadrosaurs, one of the things that my family originally, before I got into science, my family is really a music family primarily. My mom and dad are both musicians. My mom is a vocalist, and my dad is a drummer. And because of that, I picked up music from them. I'm originally a trumpet player, now picking up
Ooh.
guitar as well. Yeah, you can start to see the connections very quickly if you're
Yes.
looking for them.
I know where we are
Um,
going to, and I see already the dots and the lines. Yes.
yeah. So I played trumpet for quite a long time, and I picked it back up kind of recently, and I'm getting back into it again, as well as learning guitar, like I mentioned. But yeah, so because of that, when I came into academia and whatnot, I did come in from a music point of view because that's what a lot of my family did. And because of, or well, maybe not because of that, but funnily enough, during my undergrad, I didn't study geology really at all. I studied bird vocalization at UT Austin, where I did my undergrad with Dr. Julia Clark,
Hmm.
and I looked at how birds vocalize and how the vocalization of birds evolved over time. Specifically, I looked at ostriches. I did looking at their anatomy of their vocal organ, which birds have a unique vocal organ to any other animal in the world. We recorded the sounds that they make, and put that together into a paper that's now published as of earlier this year, to think about where birdsong comes from and how that evolved over time. And so the music connection already started pretty early there, linking up to science, because I was thinking about pitch and frequency and all of these different things that applies as much to any sound as it does bird sound, including music. And so when I got to grad school, I before my project had really kind of started to coalesce in a way. I had a weekend that I was bored, um, and I was thinking about instruments and sounds and dinosaurs, and I was like, wouldn't it be cool if I did a physical reconstruction of what people kind of famously did in the 90s with this animal Parasaurolophus, um, and made a physical instrument based on the internal nasal structure and crest of this hadrosaur dinosaur. And so I got up. Well, first of all, I read a bunch of papers, and then I took measurements off of diagrams and stuff, and I kind of made a plan. And then I went to the hardware store and I bought a bunch of PVC pipe, and I put it all together to be the right length and roughly the right shape. And eventually I would take a heat gun and bend it to be the right shape. And I went out to the park and I attached a balloon to it and to mimic a vocal cord. And I blew in the balloon and it made a wild sound. Um, and that was the start of the Hadrophone saga.
I'll stop you there. You won't see it now because it's on Twitch, but I had the video from Twitter. So I
Amazing.
will let the people see and hear what you've done because I exactly the video of the Parasaurolophus drone, the one in between the trees in the wood. So here we are, guys. This is Michael a few years ago, ready to blow inside a Parasaurolophus head. So, and be amazed, guy, because this is literally the moment when I say I need to talk to this guy as soon as possible. In fact, I think I wrote you literally after a few days that you proposed it. It was my very first message to you, like, this is amazing. Okay, so all for you guys. I'm gonna rise up the volume and let's go.
So this is phase 2 of the hadrophone. You can
The
see here
phase
that I've
two
gone ahead and
video.
added the curvature of the crest modeled off of Parasaurolophus walkeri. So let's go ahead and see if this changes anything about the sound that's produced by this same mechanism. So this is phase
Now,
2 of the HADRO.
I have the very first question to you. Did anybody arrive alarmed by this heavy sound from the vicinity? Like, what kind of monster did this sound?
So, if I recall correctly, so the video in the woods, if it's the one with the curved pipe, that was at my parents' house,
Okay.
out in the country. So no one heard that sound. But when I first made it, before I bent the PVC pipe with a heat gun, I did take it out to a public park to test it.
Oof.
And there were people around. They weren't too close, and no one specifically came up and asked me about it. But I did get a few looks of like, what in the world is that?
Because I imagine this. We will talk about this because this is very interesting. But this is a sound of a low frequency, so it could be
Very.
heard from quite a distance, not like a high pitch
Yeah.
sound. So I would expect maybe, I don't know, maybe also some dogs or horses started to bark and basically make some sound, because I would expect that this has been heard by also many animals in the vicinity.
Yeah, it's quite a low frequency sound. If I recall correctly, it sits somewhere around 65 hertz,
Okay.
which is very low. We stopped being able to hear somewhere around 30-ish hertz. So it's not quite infrasound or anything like that. You can hear it, but it's quite low frequency. And as you mentioned, low frequency sounds do have a tendency to travel really well. It's why, like, if you pass by a concert or something and you hear the loudspeakers, you're mainly going to hear the bass of those speakers. Those sounds tend to travel well. It's why elephants, use infrasound to communicate over long distances and that kind of thing.
So you started with the Parasaurolophus, and if I understood from the video, you based it on the Walkeri specimen. Did you use also the Tubicens or just the Walkeri?
So I just used Walkeri because Tubicens is weird. At least the reconstructions of it I have seen give it like extra tubes that the other two species don't seem to have. And that I was like, oh, that's weird. I'm not going to touch that. I don't know if that's something real or if that's like something that, if you went back and CT scanned it today, actually would look more like Walkeri and Tubicens or sorry, Cretaceous or what. So I went with Walkeri mainly because it was relatively straight. Like I didn't have to bend it too much. It was relatively simple in design. The actual PVC required to do it was not crazy, difficult to put together. The width of the pipe actually lined up pretty well with measurements I had seen from like John Ostrom and stuff on Walkeri.
I have the 1970
yeah
paper. Yeah.
It's one of the classic paper on it.
Yeah.
So it all just kind of lined up where Walkeri, and also Walkeri I feel like is kind of that's the classic Parasaurolophus. That's the one everyone thinks of when they think of that animal. So I felt like that would be a good one to go for.
Did you, because I imagine, especially with the thing that you planned recently, that you build up more. Did you build up other version of the Parasaurolophus tribe, like Cyrtocristatus or Caronosaurus, or you move to other species, to other hadrosaur species?
So it's not something I've done yet. I'm not the first person to do physical hadrosaur instruments. Actually, there's someone, Courtney Brown, did a really cool one of Ornithosaurus using different methods. That was pretty cool. I think I would if I was going to expand, I would like to expand to other hadrosaurs in Dinosaur Park so
Mhm.
that I could build out that soundscape more and more with like distinct sounding hadrosaurs living together. But it would be really cool to do, say, like, what does Cretaceous produce, as its fundamental frequency versus Walkeri, because those are numbers that have been um, calculated
Yeah.
just based on basic air physics. Would it be cool to then compare them to, the physical instrument and see what differences show up as you start to add more complications?
This is so cool because I'm thinking, do you think is there a possibility to publish paper on sound produced by your models? I I don't know if there is some
Yeah,
journals that might, maybe some
potentially.
music science journal.
Yeah, I know that Courtney Brown actually did publish something on her Carithosauр model, mostly from I think an educational perspective,
Hmm.
on like how she built it and all of that stuff. I think if I was going to publish something on this, it would probably be something like that, something about the use of this as an educational
But
um,
I don't know because
object.
I already have the brain moving a lot. For example, if you're able to reconstruct, okay, you have the Walker Eye. Let's say that you're able to
Mhm.
reconstruct the Tubicens and the Ceratocristatus, and let's be crazy, Clatolophus and
Mhm.
Caronosaurus, just
Sure.
because. And you have all the different models, and you record every sounds, and you describe the frequency, the intensity, etc. Do you
Mhm.
think there is the base for like a study on the variation based on morphology in the frequency, possible biological implication? Because that would be something that nobody has ever tried scientifically in the paper to do it.
Yeah, I think there's potential. There are things that I would do differently if I was going to
Hmm.
approach it from that angle. For instance, one of the things that I would change is the method of producing the sound, like the sound source, so to speak. I would really want it to be something that was really standardized between them,
Yeah,
so that you're
something
only
like a
focusing on
like
this.
a
Yeah,
mantis, something that ejected a specific
yeah,
amount of
exactly. So that you
yeah.
can exactly, yeah. And then I think Um, ideally, I would probably want to go more off of like CT data and stuff like
Hmm.
that now that we're in the age of CT data, rather than, one of the reasons that I made the instrument the way that I did is because PVC pipe is accessible. Like I can make that easily, and other people can make that easily. We can, it can be used as an educational
Yeah.
outreach object really pretty easily. But you could do something like actually what I did with this. This is a baby Parasaurolophus. This is the Joe specimen. This is
This is the one,
actually Keratoconus.
The Raymond Alf.
Yes, correct. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's this guy. I just
Oh.
grabbed CT data out of the paper and mirrored it so that you get, both sides of the crest, which are not well preserved in the original specimen, and just 3D printed it. And I think doing that method, maybe you could do something a little bit more like that. But you can see here, there's the method that I use to actually produce the sound is pretty simple. It's balloon vibrating. It's similar to like instruments that grade school kids will build called reed, or what are they called? Membrane reeds or
Mm-hmm.
membranophones.
Yeah.
It's the same basic concept, a membrane vibrating to create noise, which in a real animal, is similar to what we do. We use vibratory membranes to create a sound. So I thought that thematically it also felt, um, you know, true to life, even if it's not perfectly exactly like the real thing. It mimics the way that animal vocal cords work in a general sense. Um, yeah.
Would you try it? That a small one?
Yeah, I
Please do
can. So
so.
this is, if I recall, very slightly scaled up from the real specimen, partly just so people could see it better. Again, this was an outreach tool. We used this at the exhibit that we put on recently. But basically, you just, pull it over to the side so that it will vibrate and blow in, and You know, it's quite a lot higher than
Yeah, in fact,
the
the
adult instrument.
microphone don't catch it.
Oh, it doesn't catch it. Oh
No,
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 dang.
it's not your problem. It's the problem of the microphone because too high sound are
Hmm.
silent from the microphone.
Yeah, yeah. I'll try here. I'll try one more time by flipping it around and see if maybe that helps.
Now, yeah, now we heard
Better?
it. Now we
Better.
heard it. Yeah.
Okay, great. There you go. So now you can hear it's quite a bit higher than the adult instrument, and there's a pretty simple reason for that that links up to the way that instruments work. If you think about a brass instrument, I play trumpet.
Hmm.
Um, when you look at a trumpet versus, say, a tuba has not only wider piping but also a lot longer piping.
Hmm.
And when air is vibrating through a tube in, say, a brass instrument, the longer amount of tube that it has to vibrate through, the lower pitch sound it's going to produce. It's why when you take a trombone and you extend the slide out, that lowers the pitch of the trombone. So in the same way, as these animals aged, you would get a lowering of the pitch of the sounds that they make. Kind of like how we, when we're young, we have a higher pitched, you know, voice than we do later on in life because our whole vocal apparatus is lengthening over time and we're getting longer, larger vocal cords and whatnot.
I mean, this is already a result to publish, or in my opinion, like a difference pitch in hadrosaur vocalization, ontogenetic differentiation in pitch vocalization. Yeah, yeah, they already have the title. No, I mean,
Yeah.
I
Well,
understand.
one of the fun parts is that this is something that's in the paper about that baby Parasaurolophus specimen.
Mm-hmm.
They calculated it just based on the length of the
Ah,
vocal tract.
okay.
They calculated what the fundamental frequency should be, ideally, just based on the resonance frequency. And it's just based on what I forget who had done that. It was Weishempel
Oh yeah.
did back, like one of the original people to actually suggest this for lambeosaurs. All he did was just to take the length of the vocal or of the nasal tract and, assuming a constant tube thickness and knowing what happens to sound when it goes around a bend, you can mathematically solve for what the fundamental frequency should be.
Ah,
And sure
interesting.
enough, actually, Walkeri came out around the same range as what comes out of the hadrophone. So it makes mathematically you can do that. It makes sense.
Interesting.
Certainly, adding in soft tissue and all that fun stuff might mess with it a little bit, but at least in a general sense, both the little guy and the bigger one both kind of reflect what the established literature has suggested so far, which is kind of fun.
Since you mention it, can you teach? Can you tell us what you have done recently with a big one?
Yeah, so I guess so. The next thing that happened once I built that instrument was that you can see in the original version that was what I posted to Twitter.
Hmm.
And when I posted it to Twitter, I was just having a little bit of fun, like, "Hey, look, this fun little thing I built," and it blew up in a way that I didn't expect it to.
Oh, come
Honestly,
on, man! You should have
um,
expected it that something like that would explode. You even receive a message from old Belgium.
yeah, it was like it was racking up lots and
But
lots and
because
lots of
I, I, I,
views
I
very
literally
quickly.
I literally published a Parasaurolophus paper a few months before, and you arrive
Right.
with a Parasaurolophus vocalization. I mean, come on, of course I was gonna write you.
Well, I think this was also around the time, if I recall correctly, part of what made me like why I was thinking about Parasaurolophus was I saw all of that really fantastic Louis LaRosa art that
For
was
the one
associated with this. Yeah.
for my
Uh-huh.
comic.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that one. Uh-huh. Yep, that
Yeah,
one.
yeah.
I had been seeing a lot of Parasaurolophus because of that. And so that was what got that animal into my brain. I mean, I liked Parasaurolophus generally. It's a cool animal for a long time, but it had been brought back into my brain in a way that it hadn't been for a minute.
So there's a
once I
bit of Filippo in the HADRO-DRONE. Oh god,
there
you
is
made
a little bit of Filippo in
you
that.
made my day, man. You made my day.
Well, so I ended up I put it on Twitter and it blew up, and I was like, okay, wow, people like this. What else can I do with this? Because I mean, I had the instrument, and I was kind of thinking about what I could use it for. And the biggest thing that I was thinking about was educational stuff. And so the first thing I did was that I built, I frankly, I made it prettier. I put a head on it. I built a head that fits onto the end of where the nostril would be in the pipes, and painted it up and all this other stuff and made it look pretty. And then I got together with now a good friend of mine, Joseph Neidorf is his name. He is a professional composer.
Hmm.
In fact, actually, like really good one. He won a regional Emmy this past year for
Really?
some composition he did for a short film. Yeah.
Wow.
And he is the husband of a office mate of mine who is also a paleontologist. So she introduced me to him, and we got to talking. And I was like, "Hey, I built a thing. Do you want to like do something with it?" And so we start to work on what eventually we ended up calling the Prehistoric Soundscapes Project. And that is what we recently just got done running last week. What it became was a physical exhibit at the local botanical garden, Como Conservatory, here in Minneapolis. And in Como Conservatory, they have this beautiful, what they call the fern room. And this whole, because Minneapolis, for those who don't know, is very, very, very cold during the winter. It was down to well below freezing
Wow.
for the past few days.
Well, I know that Chicago can reach like a -20 sometimes, so...
Oh yeah, here it can get
-10,
-30,
20
-40.
Celsius degrees.
Yeah, well, the fun part about Minneapolis is around -40 is the point at which Celsius and Fahrenheit overlap.
Okay.
And at that point, I can just say that it's cold. Because it can get that cold here.
-40.
And so because, yeah, it gets cold. It
I
gets
know,
really
I know
cold.
that, I know that in Drameller at the Tyrrell Museum, sometimes I have Darren Tanky telling me, "Ah, yeah, Filippo, here's -43." I go, what?
Yeah, at that point, it's just cold. It's just cold. But because of that, Como Conservatory is a greenhouse setup. It's all enclosed. And so because of that, they can have this absolutely beautiful room full of nothing but fern species and horsetail species.
Very,
Tree ferns and
very
really,
prehistoric.
Really gorgeous. Yeah, very, very. And that's one of the things they advertise about it is like in the room, there's a sign that says, "Hey, where are all the flowers?" And so they talk about the fact that, you know, ferns and horsetails are flowering plants. They're gymnosperms, not angiosperms. And because of that, I walked through there one day and was like, wouldn't it be cool to put up a bunch of speakers in here and have like a soundscape using the sounds of the hydrophone to make you feel like you're walking through a Cretaceous fern forest? And so I got with Joseph about it, and we set to work on it. We recorded the instrument at the local music department here in Minneapolis, and we mixed it together with a lot of modern animal sounds of things that would have been alive at the time: crocodilians, certain types of birds, frogs, insects, that kind of thing.
Wow.
And we made a soundscape that represents what it might have been like to walk through the Dinosaur Park Formation 75 million years ago. And so we just ran that as an exhibit this past few weeks, and it went quite well. Actually, here I may not be able to show the big adult, but I can show this guy.
Don't make it. Oh no, okay.
So,
oh my god, I want it.
This is a little older than hatchling Parasaurolophus that I built to go in the fern room. I built a couple of critters to run around in there associated.
How did you made it? Is it 3D printed or sculpted?
This is sculpted. So I started on a aluminum foil and cardboard base with some armature wire, and used clay to just slowly
Okay.
build it up and build it up, and eventually you end up with this guy.
Wow, it's amazing.
The other thing that I had the pleasure of doing was that I worked with a artist friend of mine who's a 3D, really talented 3D artist. Works on the game Prehistoric Kingdom, if you know that game.
Really? Oh, of
Um,
course, I
yeah,
sometimes I stream it here.
yeah, great game. I love it.
Yeah.
And her name's Ida Costa. Ida is fantastic. She's really talented. And one of the things that we worked together on was that I was going to help her with another project, and she also was like, "Hey, I want to make you a Parasaurolophus." So she made a 3D model of a Parasaurolophus that we lovingly ended up calling Bo. Um, and that he was able to have for promotional material and for visualizations and even a little animation of it falling in a forest, which was very fun. We
Nice.
got to have that up on a video screen. And so we matched the colors on Bo to the little guy. This is
Wow.
Arrow, is what we called this guy.
Oh,
So it's bow and arrow. Um,
seriously?
um, yeah. Ina is great at names in a way that I am not. I was so happy when she came up with that. It was great. But we like went through a whole design process of thinking about, potential color schemes and patterning and all of that kind of thing, the soft tissues that we wanted to represent. It was a lot of fun. I've never gotten to do I do some art in my own time, but that was sort of a full creature design process that I had never gotten to be a part of to that level.
Hmm.
So it was a lot of fun.
Interesting. And so you sculpt also the head of the adult.
Yes, yeah, that was using foam clay, which is this, it's what it sounds like. It's foam that works essentially like clay, where you can sculpt it however you want, and then it'll sit, and then it'll keep its shape. So I made a full head that I will not bring over here because it's very large. It's like,
Yeah.
about this big, and it sits on the instrument itself, so that when we were in the exhibit, or anytime I take this out for outreach, I've taken this to undergrad classes and that kind of a
I
thing.
imagine the kids and the students go crazy when see that stuff.
Yeah, it's always quite fun, but it gives them a visualization of like, okay, where do these tubes sit
Hmm.
in the head? How does this actually work? So it works, it's a little more visually easy to
Yeah.
understand than say, just the PVC pipes on their own.
Hmm. Also, that you mentioned, there was in the paper of Ostrom, he was writing about that some Parasaurolophus, maybe to be changed, now I don't remember, they might have more tubes inside, more cavities, a more complicated arrays of passages. If this is proved to be correct, maybe with future CT scanning and stuff, are you planning to try to make your model a bit more complex in terms of tubes?
If any research like that comes out, I would love to. It'd be really interesting to see how it affects it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, it kind of depends on if any research like that happens. For now, I've stuck with sort of the conventional model for
Mm-hmm.
now, but it'd be a lot of fun to adjust it in those ways. And there are certainly adjustments I'm already planning to make going forward. Because even though we ran the exhibit, it won't quite be the end of this project
I
yet. We've
imagine.
got to
I
go.
hope for you that is just the beginning because I imagine I don't know the Royal Theatre Museum asking for something similar because I mean, it's literally there and they might have a beautiful setting for everything because they have a wonderful museum and come on, everything comes from there. So it would be
That would be a lot of
amazing to
fun.
to
Yeah.
have that. Um, are you planning to try other lambeosaurines as well?
If I can get a hold of some good data, that would be a lot of fun to do. The next steps that we're planning to take with the project generally is that, so we did the physical exhibit in the Fern Room, and it went really well. So next, we're planning to take it digitally, essentially make a digital version of that experience so that people who couldn't be there in person can experience the same sort of thing, as long as you've got, a computer and some headphones. Um, and Yeah, so we're gonna do that, and I think as part of that, it would be cool to try some other lambeosaurs that were living there. I would probably want to find because one of the other reasons I picked Parasaurolophus is Parasaurolophus's tubes, or at least the way they've been interpreted, are relatively simple. It's basically just up, around, and back with a little dead end chamber. Or lambeosaurians, things like, well, Lambeosaurus proper, Corythosaurus, animals that were living in Dinosaur Park, have a really interesting sort of like, it spirals around quite a lot more. It's a lot more complicated. And so that would be a challenge, but it would be interesting to try to reconstruct using the same methods. And it would be interesting to see how much it changes the sound. Like, assumedly, the general character of the sound is going to be the same. It's going to sound like a honk, probably.
Yeah, but it's interesting
But
because
the fundamental frequency would probably change based on the lengths of the pipes
because
and
I'm
things like
thinking
that.
about since you were speaking about the musical instruments, Parasaurolophus can be connected to like the long. I don't know the English words. The one that you play.
Trombone, yeah.
The trombone. Whereas Corythosaurs with the spiraling
Hmm.
inside the crest is more like the horn. The
Yeah, more thinking like more French horn.
yeah,
And so
French
they
horn.
do have different, like those different brass instruments have sort of different characters of sound based on the way they loop and the widths of the pipes and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think those are the kind of characteristics that you could pull out if you change species. Is generally a brass instrument sounds like a brass instrument, but they all have a little bit of a unique twinge to them based on the shape of the instrument itself.
Mm-hmm.
So I imagine something similar would happen with hadrosaurs.
It's crazy to think that if that is the case, it would make Parasaurolophus one of the most simple Lambeosaurian because the crest is, as you said, very simple. It's just a upper tube, a dorsal tube, turning, ventral
Mm-hmm.
tube, and down. Whereas all the others are more complicated, much more complex. Uh, yeah, it's interesting to me because Parasaurolophus is one of the most famous. And
Mm-hmm.
some people that I want a more sophisticated one because of the giant crest. Maybe the giant crest was because it couldn't get more complicated than that, so it just went
Right,
in
yeah.
length rather than the complexity of the crest.
Yeah, well, and so I think it also partly goes back to the underlying like um, selection pressures for why they're doing this kind of a thing. And funnily enough, a lot of people compare them to brass instruments, which I think is an apt comparison. There are actually modern analogs for animals that do kind of similar things in the modern, and it kind of goes back to some of my undergrad research. Birds, actually, they don't do it with their skulls.
Huh.
However, there are a lot of birds that take the windpipe, the trachea, and will loop it around inside of their chest.
Yeah.
And
What
what
was?
they're doing by doing that is extending the length of the vocal tract. And if you go back to what lengthening the pipe does, it lowers the sound. Um,
So longer trait, lower the sound.
Generally, yeah, that's the
Okay.
general trend.
Okay.
And you can try this at home, by the way. If you have like some cardboard like paper towel tubes, and you do the exact same thing I did, literally just a balloon and a pipe on it over the end of the cardboard tube, and you blow into it and you vibrate it, it'll make a sound. If you stick another cardboard tube on the end of that and you do it again, it's going to be lower
Oh,
because you've lengthened the amount of tube.
interesting.
So that's something that you can do, like just a quick little simple experiment at home that you can do that demonstrates that general trend. And so it's part of the reason that big animals make low sounds generally, longer longer vocal tract, lower sounds. But when you look at hadrosaurs, they're essentially taking that and kicking it up a notch by just lengthening the vocal tract to a ridiculous amount. And so I kind of imagine that Parasaurolophus has this really long crest off the back of the head because it just makes the vocal tract longer and longer and longer without having to do a lot of really crazy, manipulation of the vocal tract itself inside of the skull. It's all off the back of the head. It's just straight.
And now, since we are like that speaking and ideas are flourishing, what's your take then in Saurolophine? Because we in the dinosaur park we have the coexistence of Lambeosaurines, Parasaurolophus, Lambeosaurus, Corythosaurus, and then Saurolophine, such as Saurolophus, Prosaurolophus, one of the very first Edmontosaurus, Gryposaurus. Of course, not all of them together; they are different in the stratigraphic position in the dinosaur park. So, but more or less in the same time, you always have at least one Lambeo, one Sauro. But Saurolophines do not have an extension of the nasal crest and the nasal chamber. So, maybe they produce higher pitch sound compared to the cousins?
Potentially so, yeah. Being large animals, generally the sounds are still going to be somewhat low. They just aren't like exaggerated to the crazy level that Lambeosaurs seem to have been doing. And I kind of wonder, it's weird because like Lambeosaurs still have an emphasis on visual display. Clearly, they have these big weird crests coming off their heads.
Yeah,
that's partly a sound thing, but it's also multifunctional probably. Whereas Saurolophines really only go for visual. Some of them, Saurolophus and things like that, have the nasal crest that has no tubes running through it. And so I wonder if there were different selection pressures acting on these different two groups of hadrosaurs. And maybe they were doing something different enough that they were just fine coexisting alongside each other.
I know one of the speculative hypotheses is that Saurolophines, since they have a wider, broader beak, they were supporting higher, flesh sacs on top of the nostril to resonate. Yeah. Would you think that might produce a sound similar to the Lambeosaur in longer tubes, or different anyway?
It's possible. I suspect it would be of its own unique character, given that the length wouldn't be quite the same. You wouldn't be getting, a meter or more of extra vocal tract out of that. But I wouldn't discount the idea of Saurolophines, because there's like, if you look at Saurolophus, the areas around, before you hit the beak, are these big, weird excavated areas, and the beak is doing this weird upturn.
Yeah, but then I don't know if that is
very, very strange.
To come back to your point, I don't know if that upturn beak is a taphonomical thing, because
I don't know. From my understanding, obviously that's not the keratinous beak. That's only the bony beak. Yeah. So we don't know what the keratin beak was like. But at least to my understanding, all Saurolophus that have been found have that weird upturn.
Okay.
So unless they're all being taphonomically acted on the same way, which I suppose is possible, but we have them in, we have Asian Saurolophus, we have North American Saurolophus. I would imagine that that's a real structure, and even that's an extreme example, but like Edmontosaurus has big excavated nasal areas that I don't know what would be there exactly, but I wouldn't be surprised if something weird was sitting in that area. But probably whatever it was, different in some way from Lambeosaurines.
Definitely.
Even just based on basic physics.
So
I would suspect.
We discussed about others, but I know that at least you posted it on Twitter. You had a look also on ankylosaurs.
Yeah, I messed with it a little bit. I haven't gone too far with it, mainly because there's not much published in that world. And, since it's not I've got a PhD to do, basically.
True.
That you know, you can't do everything.
Yeah.
Their ankylosaurs do have weirdness going on inside the skull. I don't know. I mean, no one knows really at this moment in time.
Yeah.
If that was something sound related or not. I know that there are good papers on thermoregulation and stuff like that.
I think
Like
there
the
was
paper that
I think there was a recent paper, I think this year or last year, that it was advocating for vocalization in ankylosaurs,
Oh, really? I didn't see that one if it's out.
based
That's cool.
on a specimen. Let me see if I found it.
Oh, Panachosaurus?
I think so.
Yeah. So that one wasn't looking as much at the nasal tubes as much as it was this this cartilaginous structure that they found
Yeah,
in this animal
2023,
from Mongolia.
Yoshida, an ankylosaur larynx provides insight for bird-like vocalization in non-avian dinosaur.
Yeah.
And
So
it's
they
Pinacosaurus, the larynx of Pinacosaurus.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there was the paper on that, but they didn't look at the nose at all in that. That was all, you know, laryngeal based stuff. It would be really interesting for someone to look at ankylosaurs from a similar perspective as hadrosaurs, but at the moment, no one has done it yet. So I did a little bit of a foray into it just to kind of see what was up and what it would do. And yeah, maybe it's something that could be revisited. But for the moment, at least for the outreach side, I've been kind of like, okay, well, the literature is in lambeosaurs. So if I'm going to talk about things in depth, that's kind of the world that I
course.
would be playing in for the most part, at least in terms of what's published.
Yeah, because it would be nice to see, for example, what was happening outside the hadrosaurs. And think about more basal hadrosauroids. The problem is, yeah, it's the same thing with the saurophytes. We don't have physical pipe tubes, if we can call that, as the hadrosaur, the lambeosaur in a vocalization system. I don't know
I would be
if
really fascinated to see, like, if you know, if we ever recovered some kind of basal lambeosaurines that were like, you know, if we could get like a progression through time of the directions that lambeosaurines went with their tubes, because once they show up, you get a bunch of lambeosaurines that are all doing very different things. So you get the, you know, the Parasaurolophus grade guys that are Parasaurolophus itself, Platylophus, Coronosaurus, that shape. And then you get the more Corythosaur shaped guys that are Corythosaurus, Lambeosaurus, Hypacrosaurus, other animals like that, that are really quite different relatively quickly in terms of time.
Yeah, no, because I'm having just for my memory to come back. The most basal Lambeosaurus right now are Aralosaur, Jaxartosaur, but there are not so much material about the crest. In fact, they kinda look like Griposaur, so it's still to be extended that way. Because after that we have the Synthosaurus, and yeah, we have the new reconstruction of the Synthosaurus crest, but we still need to have a perfectly preserved Synthosaurus crest or Pararaptodon, since it's a Synthosaurini crest. So yeah, no, this is the problem with these animals. So we lack the beginning of it. As for many dinosaur groups, we lack the beginning of them. But yeah, no, that would be very interesting to check how the things were evolving at the base of the big vocalization outgrowth, let's call it.
Definitely, yeah.
Because I was in Russia for my PhD a few years ago, and I get to see the element of Olorotitan. It's
cool.
It's basically impossible to reconstruct because it's strongly distorted, and it's not, the crest is not complete. So you only have the upper part, the one that later on becomes the axe. But the axe part is totally reconstructed. It's hypothetical, because there are some bones but not articulated, so the paleontologists try to find a way. So I would expect the crest for Lorotita to might change in presence of more material, but even then, Um, sorry, I have a bot attack. Wait a sec. Fuck. Well, but I have the stream bot to take care of it. It's just that for a moment I will have a lot of new follower. It's just a bot attack. Now, so we were saying, yeah, no. So we have the we would like it would be nice to see Ankylo. So do you know? Do you think there are other type of dinosaurs, even not just ornithischians, where these things can be done? Well, something
So
similar to your
other,
project.
yeah, other dinosaurs are hard. And it gets to some of the stuff I did during undergrad, primarily because lambeosaurs are unique in that they physically, like the nasal passages, are preserved in bone in the skull, which oftentimes, not even certainly there are many lambeosaurs that we don't know the insides of the skull, but in more than in other animals, we can actually reconstruct most of the nasal passage, and it seems specifically adapted for making sound.
Mm-hmm.
In most animals, that is not how it works. In most animals, everything that you do vocally is primarily soft tissue. Think like, in us, or larynx or trachea is primarily soft tissue or cartilaginous. The vocal cords inside are all soft tissue and thus will not preserve at all. And so lambeosaurs are kind of unique in that they give us this physical, like very direct physical recoverable window into what their vocal tract would have been like. Whereas in, say, let's take like a theropod, like a tyrannosaur or something. In them, we might have a general idea of what the nasal passage was doing, but because in lambeosaurids it seems specifically adapted for the purpose of vocalization, we don't know whether tyrannosaurs were doing open mouth vocalizations primarily, closed mouth vocalizations. The main thing that we don't know, and that gets to what I was partly doing in undergrad, or at least the project I was helping on, was the fact that one of the biggest mysteries that remains in the world of dinosaur vocalization is what vocal organ they were actually using to produce sound. Most tetrapods, like us, use a larynx. Birds don't. They use the syrinx, which is at the base of the trachea. It is a completely unique vocal organ. And we don't know when that new vocal organ originated. We actually are starting to actually understand more about how they got it than I would ever have thought we would have. There was a study that I am an author on, because they used some of my ostrich data for it. And
they use. Sorry, you jump out with the sound. They used.
Oh yeah. They used some of my ostrich data for it, so I'm an author on that paper. And it came out, I believe, earlier this year, I believe, if I recall. And it was this group from Harvard. And what they did was they looked at the development of how the syrinx and larynx actually develop in very, very, embryonic animals. And what they found was that the genes that, like, basically start the growth and control the growth of the vocal cords in the syrinx are actually the same genes that control the development of the vocal cords in the larynx. Despite the fact that they're completely different organs, they have nothing to do with each other. They repurposed the same genes that were used in the larynx for in the syrinx in birds.
Interesting.
Which is fascinating. And that starts to get at like how you would evolve a structure like that, and the how would be, reusing old genes for new jobs. But it doesn't tell you when. And so we don't know if dinosaurs were using a larynx or a syrinx, or if at what point in dinosaurs it changed over, or if it's a completely unique thing to birds. What we would need to know that is a really, really fantastic fossil.
For
Um,
many other things.
as for many things. Now, in this case, it is possible. This is not a fossil that cannot exist. My undergrad advisor, Julia Clark, was one of the people who actually found the oldest, or described the oldest bird syrinx in the fossil record. And it goes back to the Cretaceous.
Mhm.
It's an animal called Vegavus from Antarctica. And they have the tracheal rings that make up the syrinx, and they are like organized.
I
So we know that it
wonder.
had one.
I wonder. Do you know the Italian one, Scipionyx?
Scipionyx, yeah.
I want because Scipionyx has the trachea preserved. I don't know
Yeah,
if
I've never found like good, like really, really nice figures of it. Like it's really hard to see what's going on with the trachea. There's just an arrow that points trachea
No,
on
I
all
have.
of the pictures.
Do you have the monography of it?
I don't know if I do or not.
I can send it to you because I
I
have
would have
it.
to go and check. Yeah,
I
yeah,
have it.
that would
It's
be
a
cool.
big monography. No, because
It's,
I mean it does have the trachea preserved. I
mhm.
don't think they found the traits of the syrinx, but
Yeah.
maybe somewhere there could be interesting
Mhm.
to see.
Yeah, that or a similar fossil is what would be required. Because you need the base of the trachea specifically. You
But
need the
that's the point
bottom
because
part.
other bird-like dinosaur and theropod non-avian dinosaur that are well preserved. For example, I think about all the Chinese one with all the feathers and blah 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 blah. Usually
Yeah.
they are on a slab. They are compressed.
Mhm.
Scipionyx, it looks compressed, but it's three-dimensionally preserved. So
Oh,
the
cool.
cavities inside are all there. They were able to, for example, to have a look inside the stomach, and they found the mm, uh, a piece of a lizard, the scales of fish. So they were able to see
Right.
inside. They also had some electronic microscope. They were able to recognize the metameres of the muscular cells and others. So I don't know what you might do or someone you in terms of general uh,
Yeah.
with the trachea of that. That would be something interesting
Yeah,
to have a look at it.
definitely. Yeah. One of the cool things about Vegavus is that in the same way, when you think about most bird fossils, a lot of them are pressed.
Yeah.
Um, Vegavus was not. Vegavus is fully 3D.
Mm.
And the same actually goes for its cartilaginous rings. The rings in the trachea are rings. They're not compressed, and so they were able to reconstruct it three-dimensionally. And Vegavus is Cretaceous, so it's old. It's old enough, but it is a full-on. It's a neognath bird. It is a full-on bird. And so that doesn't tell us if, like how far it goes back. We only know for certain that it goes back to the base of birds. It goes back to aves. Um, but
Yeah. So we
it's
have
just we
that.
need that really good possible.
We have that. We have the Lambeosaurians. So we have a world inside to cover.
Yeah, pretty much. They've got, I mean, Lambeosaurians are this nice window into the world of dinosaur sound making that you just can't get in many other places. And maybe one day we'll get that fossil that will tell us
Mhm.
when the Syrinx evolved. But for now, it's up in the air a little bit. And so, doing something like, say, a Tyrannophone or whatever is a bit more difficult because
Yeah.
you could do it, but it would require a great deal more speculation.
Yeah. So since you reconstruct the possible vocalization of Parasaurolophus, of course you are very well acquainted with the 1997 simulation of the New Mexico University.
Yeah.
Your results, how similar are to the famous one that was produced? Because it was produced in 1997, but now is everywhere. Literally every museum,
Mm-hmm.
even the museum here in Brussels.
Mm-hmm.
You go in front of the Parasaurolophus replica, click the button, and that sound
Yep.
start. You go to YouTube videos, you have that. You go to movies, you have that. So
Yep.
everybody knows that because it was the first one to be reconciled. So it was a, oh, of course, I mean, for good reason, it was very well known. So how the two things get together?
Yeah, I think on the general scale, they match up fairly well.
Mm-hmm.
Both are very low frequency vocalizations that are sort of in the realm of a honk. I would say is the kind of the closest, or bellow or whatever you want to call it. Um, so and they fall into fairly similar frequency ranges. I would have to go back and look again at the old ones, but if I recall, they're somewhere on the order of 50 or 60 hertz,
Mm-hmm.
which is, ballpark the same realm that the hydrophone operates in. So when the noise first came out of the instrument, I was, overjoyed because I was like, oh my God, it works. It sounds like what it's supposed to sound like. um, so I would say generally they line up fairly well. They don't sound exactly the same, obviously,
Of
because one of
course.
them is digital and one of them is physical. But on the whole, it generally lines up pretty well.
Nice. I mean, and I really hope this for you. I really hope your project grows bigger and bigger because it has all the things to become something important. Also, and I hope maybe you will be called for like movies or documentaries to create the sounds for it. I mean, it would be amazing, especially if
That would be a
you
lot of
if
fun.
you are able to create a more diversified fauna, as you say, that is one of the
Yeah.
possible, except for the from the PhD madness, that would be something to do in the future. I really hope so because I would be really interested to see how this project develops, especially because this year I think, yeah, it should be this year, 2025. There's gonna be the volume of me and La Rosa coming out, so it would be
Right.
nice to compare the two, make something together. Like I don't know. That's just my mind going
Yeah, yeah.
wild there
If y'all
because
do like a graphic novel version, like
that would
a
be
digital version, you
that would
know,
be
hit us
amazing.
up.
That would be amazing. Just I don't know how it was with the copyright because for me it would be instant, but there are copyrights on top. So, but that would be something
Yeah, yeah,
absolutely to consider. Okay,
yeah.
so I think we are okay for tonight. We are already over the hour. So, if there are no questions for Michael in the chat, Michael, this is a free time for you to say whatever you want. You can send me to hell, or I don't know, give numbers to try the lotto, or it's up to you to cover this last part.
Cool. Well, yeah, first of all, thanks for having me on. I'm happy to answer any questions anyone has, in general. So stop me if people do have questions. But yeah, I guess I can. What can I do? I guess I can like kind of advertise what we're doing next. We're gonna be, like I said, we're gonna be moving and doing a digital, version of what we've been, what the exhibit was, which was a lot of fun. So hopefully, we're also going to be working further with Ida Costa to do more visual reconstructions of the animals making sound and stuff. Because Joseph is a composer, and because I have a music background as well, we do also plan on doing a little bit of for lack of a better word, dinosaur jam session. We are
I
gonna
love it.
do some full on actual like melodic music stuff with it. I don't know exactly what direction that's gonna go yet, but we plan on putting both the soundscapes themselves and that kind of thing up on Spotify and whatnot. So keep an eye out for that. Um,
Are you
yeah.
are you planning to
So
release some YouTube videos as well?
yes, yeah, we'll be doing. We've got a website in the works, and then that'll
Nice.
be paired with YouTube as well.
Okay. Nice. And
So
this is for
we'll kind of
the
try to spread it out.
and this is for the project you started in Minnesota.
Correct. Yeah, this is sort of the digital version of the
Yeah.
exhibit.
Okay.
The idea is kind of, in these videos to basically, if a time traveler went back in time 75 million years and dropped a camera and a microphone down in one spot for like 15 minutes and then just left it there, and whatever walked in front of the camera and made sounds was there.
Please, in the future, you have to do the 3 hour study, relaxing, chilling music, Mesozoic landscape.
That's the joke. That's the joke we've been making about the dinosaur jam session, is that it's going to be like Parasaurolophus beats to chill and study too.
I'm gonna use it like forever. Fantastic, Michael. This has been a fantastic chat. I'm so honored to have had you here as my first ever interviewed person. This has been crazy. This has been amazing, and I'm so happy that you created this and you are moving on with the project. Of course, I wish you the best for the PhD. I mean, I know what does it mean to go through a PhD madness. So best of luck with your academic career first, and then your dino music jamming one as well.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me on.